Happy New Year's from Witness the Innocent and all the death row exonerees and staff here. My name is Herman Lindsey, and I want to welcome you to the 2021 um, version of Crew Justice. For those that don't know, we had a nice year last year. Um, our goal is to embed all the information we can to get people in society to understand how dangerous the death penalty is and to join us in this fight. Today, I have a special guest, civil rights attorney and civil rights and death penalty attorney, Russell Neufeld. We'll have a nice conversation, and what today's topic is about is federal execution. We will I'm gonna start off by giving you a little history of what the death penalty, federal death penalty has been doing. Today I was researching, and some people don't understand the difference between the federal and the state. But the federal is the federal government, and it's led by the president, designating executions, which we have a major problem, which Russell and I will talk about a little bit later, of how I believe that Trump is using this as a revenges and abusive way, uh, and with no regards to human life. The federal executions has been taking gaps in execution. Before, let's start with uh, March of '63 when they had Victor Fequer. Excuse me if I pronounced the name right. Fequer. It jumps years, like 40 years before it does another execution, which was Jones Jr. in March 18th of 2003. From there, it jumps another 17 years, and which was the first one was Daniel Lewis Lee, which was last year, July 14, 2011. Since July 14, 11 executions to now has taken place. Lisa Marie Montgomery, who was executed just the other day, forgive her. So on on January 13, 21, she was the first woman in decades. She was the first woman to be federally executed since Ethel Rosenberg back in June 19th, 1953. And our federal system was designed, and one of the major things that they say is for justice. They say it's for justice, and the reason I'm bringing in these two cases I'm about to bring in is because it relates to some of the things that we're talking about later on in this show. But for federal executions, back in 6/18/1885, a guy named James Akron was executed at the age of 23 for a crime he had committed when he was 10 years old. Now, how do a 10-year-old deserve to die by execution? And in the United States, in the states death penalty um, system, George Stenny Jr. was 14 in June 16, 1944, out of South Carolina to be executed. So here we have that is a prime example of how our justice system is unbalanced and unjust. To take a child and to execute a child at at a young age. Both both federal and state has done this. This is inhumane, inhumane. Russell, I'm gonna start off with the question of why do you think all of a sudden, here it is, we're with 17 years that went by, and all of a sudden, from July 20 to now, it's just like the federal into a rapid execution, which as I just found, we got one tomorrow, I think, and you said the day after,
One today, one tomorrow.
what is your opinion to this? I mean, this is just crazy, just to
Yeah.
so repeatedly, so quickly.
And I think the whole thing was completely cynical on the part of the administration. It didn't, the way you could tell what they were thinking is by who they decided to execute and when and in what order. So if they wanted to restart federal executions, normally what would have happened is the person who was on death row the longest, who got sentenced to death, the longest to go, would be the first person to get executed, and then you'd work your way up. But that's not what they did. They decided we're going to first pick out 5 people, and we're going to pick 5 people who were all convicted of killings that included the killings of children. Even whether the people involved actually killed the children or not wasn't the question, but they'd been convicted of murders that included the murders of children. And they decided we're going to start with a whole bunch of white people. And they decided we're going to start the first one, Daniel Lewis Lee, is going to be a guy who was a white supremacist. So why did they pick those people? They picked those people because they wanted to be able to say that the people who were going to fight for these people not to be executed, these liberal, socialistic people who want to take the government away from President Trump, are people who support child murderers. That's who they are. They support child murderers. They also wanted to be able to say, see, this isn't racist. We're just going after white people, and the first guy's a white supremacist, so you can't say we're racist. So they picked these cases very politically in order to help Donald Trump get reelected. That's why they did it. And one of the things that's so pitiful now is he wasn't reelected. Mr. Barr, the Attorney General, who set the whole thing in motion, he's gone. But what Justice Blackmun called the machinery of death is continuing to roll on. And so we've got, Ms. Montgomery, who was executed 2 days ago. We have Mr. Johnson, who's scheduled to be executed today, and Mr. Higgs, who's supposed to be executed tomorrow. And all of it is just for completely cynical political reasons. It's just quite awful.
Me personally, like I said, I think we talked about this once before, is I think this was a very outstanding racial act on behalf of Trump administration at the beginning, as you were saying. They picked and choose, and it was right at the time when they was having all these rallies and this Black Lives Matter movement was in, that he decided to take and pick the those 4 individuals that was tied into racism as a way of execution. But the funny thing about it is that, well, not actually funny, but the odd thing about it is that as soon as Trump lost in his campaign, he picked 4 more, but 4 more was Black. Right. And then he picked the one woman. As if
one Native American.
right. It's as if there was he also picked the woman, but uh, this I think that Trump is also Trump. I'm not going to say just Trump because he has people behind him in this administration that's backing him with this, so they're responsible too. So I think that these are statements to put in history or to get popularity or but they have no regards to life. And our justice system is our justice system is just being abused by the people in power that has the power to sign the death warrant. But we also have to blame society because society is the ones that voted for death in the penalty phase, which gonna bring me up to this next issue. I, I was listening on the radio today. Lisa Montgomery sister was talking, and she was talking about all the things that Lisa had went through, all the abuse, the rape when she was as little as 4 years old by the mother, Judy, boyfriend. She was getting raped, and then as she got older, you know, she got married. He was raping her and abusing her, and the thing that happened is that she went to the police a few times, and one time she went to them telling them that she's been raped and things, and they just drove her from the police station to home and just left with her, you know, and a lot of this did not get into the penalty phase, and it's like her sister said, she was going through so much and she was getting beat up and nobody to turn to. The very people that's supposed to hold up justice and the very people that's sitting here executing her for what she has done did not try to seek any justice for her, and she snapped
Yeah.
and she lost it and she got in this slump world and she did something that no regular human would actually think of doing. The crime she committed is not coming for someone to think to do, and yet they didn't find her with a mental state to say she was competent.
And, you know, there's a lot of people who commit crimes and they're mentally ill. But Lisa Montgomery's crime by itself showed how crazy she was because she couldn't have a baby herself. She told everybody she was pregnant, and then she went and killed a woman who was pregnant and took the woman's baby from her and took that baby home and told everybody it was her baby. So on the one hand, it's one of the more horrible things you could think of doing. On the other hand, she was clearly out of her mind. I mean, you can't think of a nuttier, crazier thing than that. And the jury didn't care, and the prosecutors didn't care, and they sentenced her to death. Um, and as you said, you know, even with the police like taking her back home to her abusive family, um, it's like it's like the community not taking responsibility ourselves for the results of our own inaction and action and our own neglect of people. It's easier to say that's an evil person, kill him, than to say, you know, we really messed up here. We really messed up and we have to take responsibility.
I am a very strong believer that to rebuild our criminal justice reform is going to start. It needs to start within our jury selection and our peers, because the way people in society, I mean, for me to being in that picture and being sitting there as a defendant and seeing the jury look at me when they thought I committed a crime, and you know, finding later reading about how juries felt and was thinking, you know, one of the things that society has is feeling desperately about is when we have a crime that is so horrendous as such as Lisa a crime that was horrendous. You know, it's like you say, it shows she's not the normal person. She's not the mental state, but instead of uh, uh, going by the applicable law and ruling her incompetent and didn't vote for the death penalty, the jury ignored the applicable law and selected jury and selected death when the only thing they're thinking about is that she went and did this horrendous thing. She cut a child out, so people perceive that, okay, if a child is killed, it's a horrible thing, which I agree. I lost my child, and I agree. I feel the pain, but at the same time, we must apply the law where it is necessary to apply the law. We cannot take our personal feelings and dictate someone else's life. So I feel that her execution is a prime example of society taking revenge on her for what she's done. So I don't quite understand that. And let's put Corey Johnson case to the map now, where here it is that, uh, from my understanding, he wasn't the actual gunman. The gunman is actually sitting somewhere in prison for the rest of his life.
That's that's uh, that's in Dustin Higgs's case. That's
Hicks,
was
what is case?
executed tomorrow.
And what is last name? Hicks.
In Mr. Higgs's case, he's scheduled to be executed tomorrow. Corey Johnson, who is supposed to be executed this evening, who may be getting executed as we're in the middle of speaking to each other now, if the Supreme Court doesn't grant a stay, which is based on their track record is highly unlikely, is intellectually disabled. You're not supposed to execute intellectually disabled people, but he's never had an opportunity under the current standards of how you determine intellectual disability to litigate that issue. And, it looks like they'll just execute him anyway. They won't care. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry. This court won't care.
I got a question. As an attorney, maybe you can answer this. Can you describe that standard that we have here intact, that the jury in the courts supposed to quote abide by?
In terms of intellectual disability,
Yes.
um, yeah, you're supposed to look at somebody's IQ, and if it's in the 70 to 75 range or less, that's qualifies for intellectual disability. Plus, how they function in the world. That is, their ability to do different tasks and function as a non-intellectually disabled human being. And they were supposed to have been that way since prior to age 18. So those are the three parts that they look at. And, and as you were saying about how juries are, a lot of times they say, the prosecutor will say, well, he was smart enough to do the crime. If you're smart enough to do the crime, I don't care if his IQ is 40, but he's obviously not intellectually disabled because he could commit a crime. So that's, and then the jury says, yeah, it's a very bad crime. And then you get a death sentence.
And that's the advantage the state has. They have numerous ways, as such as how they change the burden of proof onto the defendant and to prove they're innocent. And again, I'm sorry, I speak how I feel, but I blame our society for the lack of knowledge of the law and understanding their true duty, because in order for us to stop this that's happening, it has to come through society. Now, the other one, I I brought y'all briefed again about that, the one for the next day, Higgs. Okay, well, tell me a little bit about his case. What
Um, it was a robbery. One of his co-defendants shot and killed a victim. He wasn't the shooter. Uh, Co-defendant who was the shooter got life, and Mr. Higgs got sentenced to death. So it's a crapshoot. And one of the other things when you were talking about the advantages the prosecutors have in these death penalty cases is that to be on the jury, you have to believe in the death penalty. So the people that don't believe in the death penalty can't be on the jury. So right there, you have a very, very basic lack of fairness on who the people are making these life and death decisions.
I'm just curious. Do you happen to know in that case, did the actual gunman testify for the state?
I don't know.
You don't know, because the reason I ask that is because in many cases, they seek the death penalty and they feel like the death penalty, and it's another way of showing that it's being abused. They say the death penalty, the people in the crime deserve the death penalty, and yet here it is, the gunman can testify against the co-defendant who was not the gunman, and the gunman end up with life, and the person that didn't actually commit the crime end up with death.
And that's happening many times.
Yeah, and how is that justice? I mean, justice is not equal with that way. If you're seeking the death penalty in one, why not both? If we both got life, why not both have life? That's another way of saying that, because they cooperated with the state, they get an incentive, which most people will fabricate or say what the state want them to say in order to free themselves sometimes. And that's what happens a lot of time in these cases. And yet again, I got to go back to society on this. Society doesn't, when they're on that jury, a lot of times they don't challenge that. They don't say why is one getting one and one getting the other, or why isn't this being respected, as why you seeking death on this person and they got an intellectual disability or a mental issue, and instead they judge by their feelings and what they perceive to believe that a horrible crime. For instance, we can take right now, and a crime can happen in New York right now, where a woman and a child got killed, murdered. They could come. I'm sitting here in Florida, and they can arrest me for that crime and say I committed that crime, and the crime just happened 5 minutes ago. And I'm here in Florida, and they can arrest me and say I committed that crime. And they could put all over the news that I committed this crime. They arrested me for killing this woman and this child, and they could put it all over the news. When it comes down to sitting into the jury, I'm sitting in the courtroom, most of the jury is going to look at me as I committed this crime, this horrific crime, without even really looking at it. Hold up, this guy was in Florida. Sometimes they don't even catch that stuff. And that's one of the things that we have. That's why we're having so many exonerations, because they're not following the law, or they're not doing what is right. That people in society we need to do. And a lot of people such as myself and these other death row exonerees and other exonerees throughout the state, we suffer from that major problem in our justice system.
The presumption of guilt.
Presumption of guilt. And that's the sad thing about it. And in order for us to abolish this death penalty and to stop all of this mishaps that's going on, it's going to have to take society. A lot of times we're talking about the prosecutor misconduct. We're talking about what Trump is doing, but we are actually giving them as society the power to do that. One, by the people we vote for, and two, we going in the jury ready to go, and we just or we going in the jury looking at it, he done killed this child, you know, he deserved to die, you know, and you prejudging, or, you know, and attorneys such as yourself, you know, you've seen plenty of times when you in a trial, and you know the prosecutor is turning things around, but yet the jury is buying it.
Yeah, and you know, Herman, I couldn't agree with you more that until we really change the hearts and minds of, you know, the people in this country, we're not going to deal with the underlying problem. And I'm hoping that, you know, if out of the horribleness of these last 6 months where they've now killed 11 people and are hoping to execute 2 more, that maybe there'll be some kind of reexamination of not relying so much just on lawyers and legal arguments, but really doing what Witness to Innocence does and what, you know, a number of other groups have been doing over the years, which is really trying to go to the people and really, you know, change people's consciousness about these issues.
You know, you know, I've go through life with a hardship, and one of the most painful things is when you're doing this type of work, you see the error right there in front of you, and there's nothing really you can do about it, you know. And then you come up to dates like this where people are being executed, and you like, hey, I was almost that person. And you want to make the change, but yet it's the change, it seems so difficult when all the signs and the all the signs, all the errors are there. We've been screaming about prosecutor misconduct for years and their immunity, you know, to what they can do and the power we have in the justice system. We talk about how the governor, you know, signing warrants and things like this, but the people are failing through our votes and through our jury. We are giving them the power to do this. And people say they can't never understand how I would feel, you know, you can never understand how I feel. Well, that's maybe because people need to take a look at reality and understand that we as society, we control a lot of things. And we on jury, we, you know, we determine someone's life. And if you don't determine it right, our courts may not. Because here it is, a lot of these executions are happening. For instance, the case you was talking about, where he has the intellect problem, it time barred. Where do it comes at that you have a time limit to show a error that attorneys that misrepresent didn't that failed to do their jobs correctly didn't present, or it wasn't presented correctly? How is that you gonna time bar somebody when the law strictly says you can't do this, but you do it and just say harmless error or it's time barring? Well, our show is not an hour anymore, so it's 7:30. Mr. Russell, is there anything that you would like to add to the viewers before we go?
Well, just based on what, you know, you were just saying about how is it going forward that we empower people to do what they do. We've got a new administration coming in, and on the one hand, President-elect Biden's taken a position that the federal death penalty should be abolished, and he ran on that platform. On the other hand, we've got the new Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, is a very big supporter of the death penalty. And in fact, he was the lead sponsor on the bill that created the current federal death penalty that we have. None of these people would have been executed or even liable for the federal death penalty if it wasn't for Chuck Schumer's legislation. And we've also got a new Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who's been historically a big supporter of the death penalty. He was the main federal death penalty prosecutor when he was with the Department of Justice. So I think it's very important that people let the new administration know that we want President-elect Biden to keep his campaign promise and get rid of the federal death penalty and support the legislation that's now in Congress to do that.
I, you know, I know I only have a handful of viewers, sometimes 400, sometimes 1,000. But that's one of the reasons we do these videos that, if you can't do nothing else but go to our YouTube channel, Witness Innocent YouTube channels, and you share these videos. If somebody having a discussion, bring some of the videos there and let people get educated on these videos. Don't let them just sit on the web. Let's use them. And that's why we're here spending our time trying to educate people and trying to prevent innocent lives from being taken and human lives from being taken. To some people that don't understand that, if you was calm, if you was calm, and I'm gonna ask this question. Normally, when someone loved one get killed, they be in anger, they be in high emotion, they be hurt, and they be wanting, I kill them, I kill them, or that's how they be feeling. But how many times out there people don't felt that way, and then when they calm down, they see their whole thought is not like that. Their whole thought is not like that. Their whole thought is not. And that's what happens in a lot of these cases. The victims' families be hurt from it. They be angry from it. And they give the state attorney the power and they want to seek death. But sometimes we need to stop and think. Are we making this decision out of reality? Are we making this decision out of pain? Are we making this decision to say, okay, I want this life taken? When do men have the power to decide whether a person live or die? You have to understand that is the law. The law is that if you kill anyone, you commit murder. So if you are pushing for the state to kill this person because of what you're pushing for to be a murderer too, that's what you become, a murderer. I sympathize for the victim families. Yes, I understand the pain. But sometimes you need to look at the deeper picture because on death row, they can waive their appeals and they get executed. They don't think about nothing, they're gone. But if they have to spend life in prison, which I really don't support life in prison too, I support rehabilitation. But if they had the choice and no other way, life in prison, that person still have life, but that person have to think about what have they done all the time, and they have to think about their consequences. So society, we need to wake up. We need to wake up. It's not our government that is really hurting us. It's us in society and the decisions we're making and not sticking together and not being humane, and protecting each other's lives, like all lives matter. So, Mr. Russell, anything else you'd like to say before I brief them with the information chart that's going to come up on the screen? You're on mute.
I just wanted to say thank you for having me on.
You're welcome every time. You're welcome every time. So can I have my information chart? slide. Okay. So we have a little bit of information we do at the end of the show. Um, a lot of people ask, what can they do um, to help out? What can they do to join this? So we give a little information. You can come on our website, which is witnessinnocent.org, and you can find all these links that you see up above. I don't think my email is up there, but and the thing about it, nobody ever used my email. Why nobody don't never email me? But I would love to hear from people and information and things that you would like to also see on this show, information and data. Uh, but my email is hlindsey@witnessinnocent.org. If you want to take actions against upcoming executions, you can go to witnessinnocent.org, upcoming dash executions. If we are, for those that don't know, we are an organization that is built on death row exonerees from around the United States. So we have numerous people involved in our organizations that has been exonerated from death row, and we may have someone in your area, and maybe you want to host the event. And we are right now we're doing we're very capable of doing virtual speaking events, and you can reach us at witnessinnocent.org, host a speaker. Also for attorney, judges, police departments, so on. um, that I want you to understand that we are not, we are neutral. We are neutral on the system. We don't feel like, because, for instance, I don't feel like just because I was wrongfully convicted that the state or the police officers or the detectives, all of them the same, because it's not the same. It's not the same. And I teach people that, we have a lot of people in the legislators, a lot of people in the police force, a lot of people in the state attorney's office that's really working with us to reform justice and try to make justice fair. It's a complicated matter, so it's hard to deal with. But for those organizations, state attorneys, public defenders, police officers, we have a program called Accuracy and Justice, where you'll get a panel of three death row exonerees and one facilitator, which is an attorney most likely. And we can sit down, we can tell the stories and ask things, you know, have a nice time. If you would like to help us, because we're a nonprofit and like support, you can reach witnessinnocent.org donate. And if you're not able to donate and you want a way to support us, join our media. Twitter at WTIUSA, uh, Facebook at Witness the Innocent, Instagram at Witness the Innocent. And with that, having you share our information, helping us share our information, that it could be the best support in the world. So with that being said, I want to just indicate that Cruel Justice Empowered by Witness the Innocent, hosted by Herman Lindsey, will be viewing every second and Thursday of the month. And our show will be at 7 o'clock. It's supposed to be 30 minutes. I'm 10 minutes over. We never be on time going off. Be on time coming on, but not going off. And I thank everybody for joining. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.